Everyone, Peter Zeihan here, still in Birmingham. The other big issue that's going on, because there's just no shortage of these things these days, is that in Iran we've got some of the most robust protests that we have had in 20 years. Certainly at least since the Green Revolution of 15 years ago. The issue is that a woman was killed by the security services because she was not appropriately dressed in their eyes. And so we've got this mix of combustible activity that is women's rights and general liberty issues and pro-Western issues, but also all the normal mix of groups that have been oppressed within the Iranian systems, Baluchis, Arabs, Azeris, and so on. At the moment, outside influence on this round seems negligible. No one is doing what the Iranians would do if they were backing protesters elsewhere in the Middle East. So there's no sign that the protesters are being armed, for example. And there's no specific targeting of the security services by any sort of paramilitary organization at the moment. But that doesn't mean that this is going to succeed in overthrowing the mullahs. In fact, probably not. For a country like Iran to have a significant political shift, a lot has to go right or wrong, I guess, based on your point of view. We've all seen 300, right? You remember when they were talking about the 1,000 nations of Persia? That's not too far off. Persia, Iran, is a country of mountains and mountain valleys, and each valley has its own identity. And after centuries, millennia of a combination of ethnic cleansing and intermarriage and trade linkages and trying to rub out a lot of the smaller groups, even today only half of the population of Iran considers itself Persian. A quarter of them are Azeri. You've got a bunch of Baluchis and Arabs and others, dozens of them. And so in order to get something to flip the government, you either have to mobilize all of the minorities as well as a fair chunk of the Persians, or the Persians have to do it themselves. And we're just not there yet. Now, if you were going to do this, you would also need a personality, somebody charismatic who can bring all the factions together. The last time this happened was 1979, and that guy was Ayatollah Khomeini. So, be careful what you wish for when you're talking about government change in the Iranian system. Also, the United States is out of the Middle East now for the most part. So that short and midterm boogeyman that the Iranians have always been able to rally around or rally against just isn't there. So this is Iran more or less stewing its own juices. And considering the general issues of economic dislocation across the country, because things have been getting worse and worse and worse for years, some version of this is probably the Iranians' new normal for at least another 10 or 20 years. Slow, steady, low to mid-level protests that never really end, that just kind of eke on. But this is what the Iranian security services were designed for. Iran, because of its mosaic of ethnicities, the Persians have always been nervous that there could be a rebellion. So they maintain, in per capita terms, one of the largest militaries in the world, over 1 million for a country that's a population of about 75, 80 million. That means that they basically occupy themselves in order to prevent these groups from ever rebelling. And a 1 million-man army is more than enough to keep a lid on protests that at this point simply haven't risen to the threshold of regime challenge. Okay, that's it for me. Until next time.
One thing is for a fact that Iran has changed forever. As of last night, there were protests in more than 156 cities throughout the country in all 31 provinces. According to the information provided by the Network of the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, which is the main Iranian resistance movement inside the country, more than 240 protesters, men and women, have been killed. More than 12,000 have been arrested. But despite this heavy crackdown, the protest continues because the issue is not simply hijab or compulsory hijab anymore. The issue is much bigger and much beyond that. The Iranian people are going for a revolution. They want to overthrow the regime in its entirety. And there are very interesting characteristics of this uprising that differentiates that from anything people have seen before. Iran has totally changed. You see the protests are happening all over the country. People from all walks of life, poor, middle class, upper middle class, are in the streets. Men and women, and particularly brave women, and young, brave women are taking the lead. And this is absolutely unprecedented. And they are very courageous. And they don't basically dodge when the security forces attack them and crack down. So the regime is in deep, deep trouble. What you see is the culmination of 4 decades of the regime's repressive policies, corruption, nepotism, and people simply are frustrated and they want a regime change. If one listens to the slogans in the streets, they are all targeting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, calling for death of Khamenei, death of this regime, and they say neither the Shah nor the Ayatollahs we want freedom. So people are not going back, they are going forward. So the situation is very fluid, and people are very determined, as you said.